In this video, I'm going to reveal to you the number one biggest secret that I've learned when it comes to creating content with automation. Having built hundreds and hundreds of automations and probably about 1,000 hours of trial and error, I figured out a lot of things on how to make content automation high quality. However, there's one thing that I've learned during this whole process of learning that I can't find many people teaching anywhere, and I'm going to show you what it is in this video. I refer to it really as a simple way as the token trap, and I'll explain what the token trap is, but the problem with it is it leads to terrible low quality content. And you might have all the skills to bring in all sorts of API calls and connect all sorts of things up using automation platforms like N8N or other platforms. But if you don't understand this principle behind what I'm going to show you in this video, you're really going to end up with terrible quality content. I can't tell you how important this is. I've built automations that are so complex, and at the end of it, I get a real crap article or blog post or whatever I'm writing out of it until I figured out what was going on, which I'm going to show you in this video. So what I'm going to do is take you through a pipeline to teach you the skills that will put you way ahead of nearly everybody out there doing content automation. The best way for me to explain this in a diagram, and then I'll show you the workflow that we're going to build together in this video, is like this. It's a content pipeline. By explaining to you different sections of how information comes into an automation workflow to create content, and in this case, we're going to do a longer form piece of content, but really the content itself doesn't really matter. It's the principles behind the techniques and the processes that you really want to pay attention to and apply it to whatever content that you're creating. But what I'm going to do is break it into different sections so I can teach the skills at each stage. So we'll look first at ingestion, which is bringing in the data that's going to train your AI. So we're going to use, as far as ingestion, we're going to do API calls and scraping. I'll show you how to set up APIs, how to scrape in information to bring it into your workflow. The next part I'm going to teach around is called processing. We're going to teach techniques in N8N. So we're going to build this in N8N, which I'm going to show you in a moment, the finished product and how it pieces together. Then we're going to go right back to the beginning and workshop it like a full workshop all the way through to the end. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to do it completely on your own. The next step's processing. I'm going to teach techniques of looping, aggregating, and iterating. This is really important to know how to deal with data. It's all good to get data in through scraping, but if you don't know how to process it properly, it's really going to be pretty much useless to you. The next one is data structuring. So after you learn how to push data through your workflow, you've got to learn how to restructure it in a way that allows for maximum quality. This is probably the one area that I see people really screw up and not understand. And then finally, probably the most important thing, which is really the big secret that I'm alluding to in this video, is this end part here, the context engineering, which is controlling the quality of the output from any of these AIs. So if you're using ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or whatever it is that you're using to drive your writing part of your content creation, if you screw this last part up, it's really going to come out bad. But I'll show you how to avoid the pitfalls that 99% of people fall into. Let me just give you a quick few examples on a finished piece of content that I did to show you the differences in what I'm talking about, just so you understand. And then we'll go through and build it all. But I did a quick run through doing a blog article on, and this example was taking the benefits of taking a cold shower for health benefits. When I looked at it, when I did it in a way that didn't control quality, you can see here on some of the points that it scored on. When it looked at one of the subtopics of brown fat discussion here, talk like brown fat as in the fat that's on your body, that brown fat. When you don't control quality, output 2 on the right, this column here is the more high quality controlled output. Column 1 is where the quality wasn't controlled properly. You can see the outcome at the end. It says outcome 2 is significantly better. It's more specific about variables affecting the result. So what you're going to notice in this simple example here, when you don't control the quality of the way the content's coming through your system, the LLMs really start to drop information off and you won't even notice. So in this example, it just didn't get the detail that was required. It forgot all about water temperature and other aspects. And in here, immune function, when it looked at study claims and citations, it didn't even tell you what the study was. It just dropped it off completely. So unless you understand and know what's going on, you wouldn't even notice that had happened. You might have continued writing an article and you wouldn't really have realized that you could have got your quality way higher had you realized. Now, the trap with this is, and why I call this the token trap earlier in this video, is a lot of these LLMs will tell you they've got massive context windows. Like, I'm talking huge, and they tell you that you can give them all this information, it's fine, and they'll process it. Well, that's actually not totally true that I've found after doing hundreds of these. What actually happens is they might take all your inputs, and yeah, they might give you an output, and technically, they have allowed you to take up that massive context window that they're telling you they can handle. But what they neglect to tell you is they sacrifice quality on the way through if you give them more and more content. But they don't tell you that. They don't tell you the more you give us, the crappier the output's going to become. So you've got to find that sweet spot yourself. And this is where the real secret sauce is when you're creating content with automation. It's finding the sweet spot where you don't push an LLM too far that it starts to degrade. And that's where you can really control how much input, output, and quality you get. It's like a balancing act. So I'll go through other examples later like this where I actually critique the two different techniques. I'm not going to do this right now. We'll do this at the end once we've actually run through and created the piece of content. Then we can have a look at the different ways that it did compared to option 1 or option 2. Again, option 1 was where it wasn't controlled very well. So I was doing a test where I'm always split testing to see how different inputs affect it, because that's the only way that I can tell for sure what's going on. So I'll take you through the results like this at the end of the video. Let me now take you over to N8N, which we're going to build this automation on. So if you want to build this automation with me, you need to be on N8N. There's a link below the video. It's my affiliate link. I get commission. If you want to do that for me, that would be great. I build all my automations on N8N, so I would use it anyway. Now, what I'm going to do here is open up N8N. We're going to build this automation here. This isn't that complicated to put together, but this particular automation is going to enable me to teach all of those skills that I mentioned earlier, all the different aspects when we looked at bringing ingestion and splitting and looping and iterating. This has got all of the techniques that you're going to need to apply. So it's actually a really good lesson builder, this one. So let me take you through building it in a minute, but let me first explain what it is that you're looking at. So first of all, I've got two triggers here. This is an instant trigger, which I'm going to use for testing later. And I'll show you in this workflow how you can split pieces of your workflow off just to test small pieces. I notice a lot of people when they're building out automations for the first time, they don't realize that you can actually break a piece off and just micro test one piece till you get it right. They sometimes tend to run the whole automation all the way from the beginning again. Or worse, when they try and get slightly more complicated and involve a looping over items, they end up looping over the whole thing like again and again and again just to test like this part. But you don't need to do that. There's ways that you can just break pieces off and just micro test. I'll show you how to do that when we work through this video. For now, though, I'm going to use a form. This is a simple form trigger. I'm going to bring a form of a topic that we're going to get an article written on just to show you how to do it. Now, of course, when you're building this out for more of a production style stuff, which is what I do, you're not going to use a form. It's not exactly super automated having to type, drop information into a form every time you want to run it. I integrate all of my automations with Airtable. So Airtable will pull the information through. But for the sake of this lesson, to keep it reasonably short, because it's probably going to be about an hour long, I'm just going to use a form to make it easy to get started and understand. So the information will come in through a form. So this is a really simple form. I'll show you how to go through it when we do it, but we're just going to enter a topic like that we want to do an article on. So in this particular one, I did it on what are the benefits of cold showers. I've been getting into doing cold showers myself recently, so I thought, what the heck, I'll use this as an example. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the topic, and then we're going to use an API call to a service that's going to go and scrape YouTube, and then it's going to get videos on the topic for us. And again, this is part of the ingestion workflow. So you remember earlier I talked about getting information into your workflow. Well, this is how we're going to do this particular example. Once we get the YouTube videos, we're then going to restructure the data, which you'll remember at the beginning, I talked about ingestion and restructuring. This is where I'll start talking about that. Then we're going to talk about techniques on how you can process that information using a looping system. We're going to loop and then do another API call here, which is going to get all the videos that we got here and get their transcripts. It's going to process them one by one. I'm also going to do another lesson here on restructuring data. So as you remember, I talked about restructuring data earlier. This is another technique inside this code node that we're going to employ to restructure the data that came out of this HTTP request where we got all the transcripts. Once we've done that, we're going to loop through and do each video transcript one at a time. They're going to come out of this loop, and then we're going to join them back together. So there's a lot of splitting, joining, filtering, and processing information as it comes through a workflow. It's a really big part of trying to do content automation. Once the video transcripts have come through, we're then going to pass them into an LLM using ChatGPT here. And this is where we're going to do some split testing. So you're going to see how we can affect the quality of an outcome by controlling how we prompt it. At this stage, we're going to give this LLM a whole bunch of these transcripts that we got from YouTube. And this one, it's 17. That's a lot of information coming in, and you're going to see why I've done it like this, because it's going to allow me to test and show and illustrate the points of controlling quality, which I talked about at the beginning of this video. So we're going to control different ways that we prompt to get an outline for an article here. So we've got ingestion, and now we're going to get an outline for an article in two different methods. One is going to be more refined, and one is going to have no refinement. Once that's come out of these LLMs here, then we're going to pass through and we're going to get article sections to be written for us for an article about this topic. And this is where it gets really interesting. In this route up the top, we're going to do another split test. We're going to pass all of the output from this LLM here into the next LLM and look at the output. And this down path, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually break up the data, and we're going to do what's called iteration and send in sections at a time to limit and control how much information flows down to this LLM here, which is essentially doing the same task as this one, but it's got a different workload of information coming into it. And this is where we can get some really interesting results. And you'll notice the differences out of these is what I showed you in those test results quickly at the beginning, where I showed you different quality outputs. And this is how I do split testing when I'm doing content creation, to see the quality differences that we get. So at the end of this video, what you're going to get is a workflow that's going to enable you to bring information in from a source, process it, structure it, and create content at the other side, and enable you to do split testing so you can see how much the quality is changing when you do different techniques. So if that sounds useful, then let's jump right in. If you could also do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe button and leave me a comment below. Leaving comments really helps the YouTube algorithm, and I really try to actually make my videos useful and practical for people. A lot of people who do these videos on YouTube, they're not really building automations for anything that useful, I find. They talk a lot, and they talk about new things and bells and whistles that come out, but I don't find them actually giving useful stuff. So if you could do me a huge favor, it would encourage me, comment below and leave me a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Okay, so let's get into this workflow. First thing we're going to do is add a form so that we can get a topic. This is really straightforward. At the top right-hand corner, just put form, and it's an N8N form here, and you want to do an instant trigger form, okay, that we do here, a new instant trigger event. Once you click that, the form's going to open up. All you have to do in here is give it a description. It doesn't really matter for testing purposes, but you do need to give a field name, and the element has to be text. By doing this, if I just disconnect that for now and just show you up here, if I unpin this now and run this workflow, this is the trigger. By doing this, the form is going to fire, and I have to actually write into the form what I actually want to talk about. So you can see here's the form here. So I'm not going to write it in, but I'll put the benefits of cold showers or whatever it is in there that I did, the exact wording I mean. But I've already done that, and it looks like because I've unpinned it, I'm actually going to have to redo that. So let me just do it again quickly now. So I'll just put that stop listening, turn that off. Let's run this again. I don't want it to run all the way through the automation, so I am going to have to take it. So I'm just going to get the exact wording that I got in here, and I think it was the benefits of cold showers. I think that was what it was, wasn't it? So let's just run that again, and it's going to say, what are the benefits of cold showers? And I'll type that into the form, and then it will come in. So if I just type in, what are the benefits of cold showers? I think that was kind of close to what I had. Let's submit that and see. Now that's submitted, you can see the webhook now fired. If I open this up, you can see here the topics come through. Now I have a topic and a text format field that I can use. Again, you could bring this topic in any way you wanted. This is a really simple way just to bring it into a workflow to get it started. I'm going to pin that now by clicking, if I just click P on my keyboard, it pins that data. Now I don't have to re-trigger it every time. Now I can connect this up to the next module, and that's always going to stay there. I don't have to keep re-triggering the module. So now what I'm going to do is go to YouTube and we're going to scrape YouTube and get heaps of videos on this topic. One way you can do this is using an HTTP module. And there's a tool called Scraping Dog that I just got shown the other day, and I wanted to give it a bit of a test. So I went over to this tool called Scraping Dog. It's basically just an API scraper. We can ask it to go and scrape some content from all sorts of places, and then it's going to bring that data back into our workflows. So the way we do this is using an HTTP module. So if I go over to the right and type in HTTP like this, click that request one, I might have to blur some stuff out here. So if I pause the video and I'm a bit choppy, it's just because my API key is probably showing up on the screen and I need to pause the video and fix it. But anyway, let's just see. So if I open it up, what you see in here is, yes, my API key is showing, fantastic, but I'll just go and delete it after the video. That's probably going to be the easiest thing to do. But what we see in here is all we've got to do on Scraping Dog is get an API key. It's actually really easy to use Scraping Dog, I must say. It's actually easier than other sites like Appify. They make it a little bit less complicated for people who don't have tech backgrounds to be able to easily do this. All you actually have to do is just bake in a URL and set it to get. That's all you got to do. Oh, and then you need one more parameter at the bottom, which is down here. You need the headers set to accept application JSON. That's all you have to do. I'll show you how to set up this URL now. If we go over to Scraping Dog here, it's just scrapingdog.com, hop on in. They give you free credit here, so you don't even have to pay to get started to use this. First thing you want to do when you're over at Scraping Dog is you need to go and get an API key. Okay, so you'll notice also before I get there, you can scrape a lot of stuff. Have a look down the left-hand side here. Scrape Amazon, scrape Google, scrape Walmart even, scrape a lot of stuff. We're going to go scrape YouTube here. That's what we're chasing after for this example. So if I go over to my settings, no, it's not settings. Sometimes you just got to remember where the heck the API key is. Maybe it's in the dashboard, or I'm probably already in the dashboard. Let's have a look down here, account. Let's go down to account. Here we go, API key. So once you're in API key, you got to create your API key. I've already got one. It looks like it only allows you to have one, which is fine. I'm just going to delete this after the video anyway. But you would just create an API key and just copy it. That's all you have to do. Then we're going to head back to N8N, and they've given you free credit, so you don't even have to add any credit, which is really handy. So what we want to do now is back here in the URL field, all we're going to do in here is create this URL like exactly as I've got it. But in here where it says API key equals, this is where you would put your API key. So I'm going to delete mine after the video, but this is where you would put your API key right there. And then you leave and search underscore query equals. And here is where we want to drag in an expression on N8N from our form. So on the left-hand side, you can see topic is over here that I can drag and drop like that. I can drag and drop that straight in there. If I just drag it again just to show you, see it shows up like that. I'm going to delete it like that, get rid of it. If I drag and drop that in here, it's actually going to map in the name of the query, which is what are the benefits of cold showers? The country's USA and the language is English. So you can leave everything else the same, just change out your API key and map in whatever topic you've pulled in from there. That's all you have to do for it to go and scrape YouTube. You can add more parameters and make it a little more complex if you want to, but you don't have to. You can just keep it quite simple and just do that to get started. So now that we do that, we would just run that. So I would unpin that and run that. And then when I ran it, you can see here, I've got a whole lot of information that's come back of all these videos on YouTube about the topic. You can see all the videos, descriptions and titles and everything. It's quite a lot of information. So now I've got some information, but it's not quite in the exact format that I want it. So I'm going to restructure it using this code node because I don't want to get all this information. All I really want to get is the URLs of the videos at this point. So I'm going to add this code node in here. Now, if you don't know how to do any coding at all, it really doesn't matter because you don't need to when you're doing this. You just do vibe coding. The best way to do vibe coding is get an account at Claude. If you don't have an account at Claude, then you can just use ChatGPT will do it pretty good as well. Claude tends to do coding a bit better. But this is just JavaScript. So in here, you just can describe to Claude what you want to happen. And all we really want to do is just extract here on this side here. If I just go down, I don't know, actually, I can't actually remember if it actually did exactly what I wanted. People also watch. I'm just looking at the data that it gave me on the other side here. It cleaned up the data, I think, or did it? I'm just trying to remember what this code actually did. Let me pause the video while I remember what the heck I did here. Okay, I'm back. I just had to read through the code and remember because I've had a total blank of what I actually did here. But I remember now here is the problem that we had when the data came in from Scraping Dog is if you look at one of the entries, for some reason here, the video views, they've given it as a text field. So you can see on this example, 850,990 views. That's a text field. I don't know why they did that. because you really want to be able to, you really want views and numbers as a number field, not a text field. And the reason you want it in a number field is if you want to filter by video views, this is kind of hard to filter by because it's a text field. So I wanted to transform that into something I could filter, because if I'm doing an ingestion process, this is one of the things that I wanted to show you. You don't just want to let everything in. You want to really filter content before it comes into your system. Letting everything in can immediately affect the quality downstream. And you're going to see why. Because when we feed LLMs information, the more information they get, like I said earlier in this video, the crappier the quality can become. So the last thing you want to do is just let all the information in. That's crap. You want to actually filter the information for what you actually need. So you have to be very careful about how much information's coming in and the quality of that information. So one example here is I only want videos over a certain amount of views. That might be one simple filter. But when I just left it like this, I couldn't even do that. So by doing this code now has simply got the text field and transformed it into a number field so that I can filter it. So if you look down here on the left, you can see view count now comes out as a number. And you can also see the length of the video in seconds is now also a number. So I can look at how long the video is and how many views it got. But on this side, the length was also a text field, which is kind of strange. So I transformed these two data into that. So you remember at the beginning of this video, I talked about transforming data into a way that's more useful and then filtering. So this is a technique that will help you when you're building out automation systems. So by doing this simple code, I've transformed the data from here into a different format. And then I'm going to add on here a split out nodes function here. So what I've done is when you look at the output here, we can split the output that we got. All we're interested in is this, the video results. Okay, we don't really need the channel and the movie results and the shorts results from the feed that we got. We really only need this, the video results. So this is where we can split out and grab from a larger output just what we're looking for and zero in on that and process that. This is where the split out function is really handy in N8N. So in order to do that, I attach a split out. And then the fields to split out, I just type in video results because this is what I want to split out. You could also drag that as an expression. Then you'll notice on the right-hand side, once I split that out, I now can iterate. And I'll explain what iteration is in just a moment. But now each individual video is its own own package of information that I can process separately. I don't want to deal with the whole thing in one hit because that's difficult. I don't want to process it like that. I always want to break things up, process things individually, and then if I want to stitch things back together later, I'll do that. But the last thing you want to do is just ram everything downstream at once. It really doesn't work. So now I've got 20 items that I can process separately, and they're in a format now that I can filter. So now that I've done that, what I'm going to do here is add a switch module. So in order to add these modules, by the way, for those of you who aren't really familiar, code node is on the right, just type code. A split node is on the right, split out. And then the switch node is this one, which I spelled that wrong. Switch is this blue one, switch. So switch is going to allow me to filter. I could have just done filter as well. Let me show you what we're doing inside this split. We're only going to let a certain parameters get through to the next stage. If we look at this expression here that I've done, all I've taken is the field called json.view, views_count, the view count, which is the one I just transformed into a number. And the reason I did that, so in this formula here, I can say it's greater than or equal to, you can see here, 5,000 views. Now, I could change that number and put 10,000 into that expression, and it's only going to let videos through that are 10,000 or more. You can play around with these parameters to see what you want to let through. And the length of the video, I've got 7,000 seconds here. Or I could change this to 2,000. It doesn't really matter what you want to do. You can change your filters however you like. But in this expression, the reason I wanted to show you it like this is I've combined two expressions, so two parameters have to be met for it to get through. It's not doing an either or, it's doing a both. It has to be both, an and function. So it's this and this, not this or this. This is important because you might want to have ways to control what you're letting through. And if you limit yourself to just have an either or, sometimes that's not really going to give you that fine tuning to let certain data come through into your system. So I wanted to show you an example when you can combine logic into one, and then you set the parameter on a Boolean to is equal to. So then you say, yes, this statement is true. And then it will only let videos come through that have a certain view count and a certain length. So now not only have I transformed data, I've also now filtered the data that's coming through. So you can see here, I'm actually going to run this by clicking the little play button. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. It's probably a little far away. So you can see here, if I look at the filter, it let 18 items through. So we had originally got 20, now we're down to 18. If I changed that parameter, it would have been different again. So it's got to be, let's say I change that to 1,000 seconds like that or something, or maybe higher actually, to let less through. Let's say 17,000 seconds like that. And then we can just run this again. Now, because all of this data back here is pinned, you can see it's all pinned. It's not going to grab this data again because I've already pinned it. So I can just run that again like this. If I just click the play button above the module, it's not going to play the whole workflow. It's just going to play this module, or just execute rather. Now this is still set to 18. Okay, it's probably just the amount of views that I got to change. I think you get my point. You can just play around with this to filter how much is coming in and how much is not coming into your system. Let's keep moving. Now that we've got this, each of these videos in a format which is enabling me to have packages at a time, one video and all of its content at a time, what I'm going to do is add a loop over items module. This is probably one of the modules that really confuses people the most in N8N, I've found. But I actually find this is probably one module I use one of the most because it's so handy when you're doing automation workflows. So just go to the right and go loop over items. Then in the loop over items, what we're going to do here, let's click on here. The output from here is going to go straight into that, which is pretty straightforward. But this is where people get a little bit confused where all these other connections go. So just delete everything back to the beginning, and then it makes it a lot easier when you add one of those loop over items. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull just one of these videos and their information through. If I set that to JSON, by the way, like this, and go edit, you can see all of the videos appear like this. This is going to show me inside all of them. But when I've closed that down and go to schema, it just shows me one, right? Because that's all it's going to do. In this flattened structure, all I'm sending through is one video at a time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click the loop over items once, and it's just going to pull the first video through. So you can see here it's through. I'm going to pin the switch like that now. Now, if we open up this loop, see that one video has just been pulled through. It hasn't pulled everything through here. Even if I go to JSON now, you can't see, there's no more fields. It's only pulled one into the loop. So now I can process this one video. So what I'm going to do is we're going to hit up Scraping Dog again. And this time, instead of going to YouTube and doing a search and just getting the actual videos, we can use another endpoint in Scraping Dog. Everything else stays the same. Make sure the method is set to get. That might have been something I forgot to say in the last HTTP request. Make sure that's set to get. Then if you look in the URL here, it's just a different URL that we're building. All you've got to do in here is put the YouTube video ID, and it's going to go and get the video transcript for that particular video. This is why we wanted to iterate through a loop over items when we're processing this. If I'd sent all 20 videos through, it's not going to know which video ID I want to deal with, so I have to send it one at a time. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see the video ID down here. This is what we want to pull through, the video ID. I'm going to delete it because I got it there twice, but you would dynamically map it into this URL. It's baked right into it like that, just like the keyword was, but this time instead of a keyword, we're now using a video ID. If you run that, Scraping Dog's going to go and get the video transcript for you. So let's run one example. I'm just going to run it once. We're not going to run it 18 times. This is just going to run it once, and Scraping Dog's going to get it. Now you're going to look at the format that Scraping Dog gives us. Notice here they've actually broken it up into timestamps and little pieces of the transcript. That's fine, but it's not exactly easy for us to use in this format, so we need to stitch it back together. So this is, again, when we're going to transform data again. So you kind of get the idea, and when you're doing content automation, you really are transforming data in a lot of different ways at a lot of different times in your workflows. The way we're going to do this is another code node. We're going to whack this code node on the end here. All it's going to do is it's going to look for all the transcripts here, which are found. Well, I'm not going to drag that in there and run it, but you see it's looking for the transcript here under transcripts, and it's going to stitch those together. It's going to join. If you look at down here, it says map and join. That's the main function that it's doing, and it's also going to trim any other trailing white space characters off here. But it's going to these fields, and it's getting each one of them, and it's joining them together. So then we get a clean output. So if I run through here, connect it and hit that once, Instead of having all those fragmented parts of the YouTube script, now look at we get a nice clean YouTube script. Bang, full transcript, and it's clean as a whistle like that for us to use. Now we're in a format that we can actually pass this on to an LLM to read because it's got a full transcript of a video and it's clean as a whistle. There's no other junk or script or HTML or any crap in there. It's just nice and clean, which is great. This is the format that you want to get your content in a workflow. So this is all well and good. Now I've got one video pulled through, scraped, and processed. So if I run the whole workflow, it's going to do 18 of these. So I'm not going to do that right now because I did it before the video to save time. But what happens is on the other end of this loop, on the output done branch, which is empty now, it would be full with all 18 transcripts. So this brings me on to the next part that I want to really teach when you're doing content automation. Now you got quite a lot of content that you got to deal with. 18 transcripts is a fair amount of content to deal with. It might be valuable, but unless you're actually using it properly, it's really not going to be that good of an outcome. So let's talk about doing different tests and how we process this. So I just want to remind you what we're doing in this workflow is we're creating a simple blog post by having an ingestion and processing it. And you remember at the beginning of this lesson, if I just hop back and show you what we talked about here, we've looked at ingesting information using an API and scraping. So we've done that part with Scraping Dog. We've looked at processing this information. We looked at looping, aggregating, and iterating. Iterating, I'm going to talk a little bit more about in just a second. That is a big one, though, so make sure you stick around for that. Then we looked at data, restructuring data. So you'll notice we've done that a few times already. We've transformed the data in a format in a number of different ways. We transformed when the video views wasn't in the right format for us to filter. We did a restructuring. We changed and transformed that data. We also did other things where we wanted to just get one part of the overall JSON output that we're dealing with. We didn't need all the other parts. We just needed each video and its information. So then we did a split out where we can split each one of those out and process them. So this is where we've done ingestion, processing, and data structuring. We're going to get on to this part of the workflow now, which is probably one of the most important things that I really want to teach. So we're going to talk about a bit more about structuring and iterating, and then context engineering to control the quality. Okay, so what we're going to do is look in here and do a basic LLM chain. For those of you who haven't done this before, right-hand side, just go basic LLM chain. This is where we introduce AI into the workflow. So what we're going to do here is attach a model to this basic LLM chain. So in order to attach a model, you need an account at whatever model that you're running. In this example, it's ChatGPT. You could use Claude, you could use Grok, you could use any other ones you want, but whatever one you're using, you need an account. So I'm not going to go through how to set up accounts at all of these things because it would take a long time. But you need to go and get an account at OpenAI, get your API key, and then come back in here and set up these credentials. And if you haven't done that before, you need to go create new credentials and then add in your API key to connect and get that working. Then you choose a model. Now, this is one important step here. The model makes a huge difference. You want to play around with the different models that you're doing for different parts of your workflow. If you need some really deep reasoning, when you want the LLM to really think about what it's doing, processing, looking, shuffling, thinking logically about what would be the best outcome, then you need to have a high reasoning model. You can't have a low model like a mini. It just won't get you the result. I've tested this quite a lot. Yeah, it'll save you tokens, but you're not going to get the result you want. On the other hand, if you've got a really simple task where you just want to match data or do something a little bit with less reasoning, then you can definitely use other models like the minis, like 4.1 mini or nano. But most of the time, if you're doing a workflow with the stage that we're at, where we're giving it a lot of information to process and understand, you really have to use a more powerful model for reasoning. So in this case, I'm using 4.1. So that's one of the most important things, or one important thing that you need to understand is model selection. So in this model here, when we prompt it, the user field is where we're going to give it the data that we want it to process. So I just gave it all of the data that came in here from all these transcripts. This is quite a lot of data. If you look on the right-hand side, we have 18 YouTube transcripts. This is way too much information to be feeding in LLM if you want to get a good quality result. But unfortunately, this is probably one of the most common things that I see people doing. Massive amounts of information coming in, and they think they have a really awesome workflow, and they don't understand that they're just heading for a complete disaster. It's not going to work. You'll get an output, maybe, but it's not going to be very good. And you're going to wonder why. And I'll show you why in a moment. But look at this information. Now, I've intentionally done this to give a bad result. But you can see this is a lot of information. Now, the problem is when I talked about at the beginning of this video, the token trap, you might think that this is perfectly fine because OpenAI tell you they can handle this many. And you'll see that they can. Because when I run it, which I did, you do get an output, no problem. But the output's not necessarily very good because we've given it too much information. But they don't tell you that. They don't make it that clear to you. You have to dig to understand that, or you have to do hundreds and hundreds of tests like I've done to find out, oh, okay, now I get it. So I've just given it this prompt here. Now, again, intentionally, I've given it a lot of different complicated things here that I want it to do. I've intentionally tried to confuse the LLM. Now, the reason I've done this is I want to illustrate a point. There's two places that you can really poison your context window by giving it too much logic. And this is where people don't understand. And this is what I said about the secret of content marketing on automation, doing these things, is this is a big deal. How much computing power and reasoning power it needs to be able to produce your output matters. It really matters a lot. So if you're doubling up and giving it a lot of input ingestion plus a lot of complexity in what you want it to do, even though it gives you an output, it's going to sacrifice on the quality. It's just going to basically, it's like an LLM is going, oh, okay, you've given me all this information. Okay, well, I don't want to screw this up for you because I'm going to look really bad if I do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ignore quite a lot of the things that you've asked me to do here, and I'm going to give you an output because I want to make it look like I did the job. But it's not going to tell you, I did a kind of a crappy output and I ignored this, I did a little bit of that, and I didn't do this part at all. It's not going to do that. It's going to tell you that it did the job for you. So this is a bit of a problem because how do you know when you've pushed it too far and it's starting to drop the ball, so to speak, and drop quality off? Well, the best way I've found is doing a lot of tests. Like I said, I've done hundreds of these, and I do this all day long for like 16 hours a day some days until I find out what works. So in this example, I've done this, and then the output, so I'm jumping around, I apologize. If you look at the output over here, we've got these sections. I prompted it and told it to take all this input and create sections for a blog. This could be anything though. You can use this for any content. But you can see this is perfectly fine. It's given me some points and references, some things to discuss, and the references that it's found. So this is perfectly fine. And at this point, it's not done a terribly bad job. But one thing I want to illustrate to you is, if we look below here and I'd done a different amount of ingestion here and simplified it, I'd probably get a bit better result at this point. It's not going to totally break your workflow and kill it, but for quality at this step. But the next step it will. So what I want to illustrate is here, you're much better off controlling how much complexity you give it. And if you need to get more things done, you're better to break that out into different LLMs to do each task rather than thinking one LLM can handle everything, because it just can't. So what you could do here is do a test here and reduce the amount of complexity at the system prompt level. And the way you can test it is to just cut that off and drag it down here. And then you can just do basically a split test and run both and then check the outputs of both. This is something that I do a lot of. I do split testing at different stages of my pipeline to see how much I can push the throttle or not, or pull back until I get the quality that I'm looking for. So at this point, if you do a more reduced prompt and simplify it, you might get more fine-tuned control over what you want to do. So in a future video, the other thing that I'm going to do to help you get even more better outputs with the quality control is a topic called fine-tuning. I'm not going to do fine-tuning in this video. I might do that in the next video. Leave me a comment below if you want me to do fine-tuning. Just to explain what fine-tuning is, it's where you train a model to be able to sound like your writing style. So if you give it enough examples, you can actually create your own model. So if I open this model up, you can actually choose a fine-tuning, your own model. Instead of GPT 4.1, you can see here, I've got all these fine-tuning models here that I've used. So you could select your own version of ChatGPT 4.1 that you've fine-tuned to get it to be exactly what you want it to sound like. Now, that'll take a whole other video, which I haven't got time for now. But again, if you want me to do it, leave me a comment below and I'll do a video on fine-tuning for you. But let's just say at this point, we've played around with how we've prompted the input that's come through. Let's take the top route here, and we'll look at how we process what it's done. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see. And when I alluded to one of the big secrets here, this is really where it comes down to how you process information. So this top route here, what we're going to do is if I open this up, I am going to give this LLM everything from that the section's plan. I've just planned an article. It hasn't written it yet. It's just given me a plan of what I should probably talk about, right? I'm going to pull all of that in and I'm going to dump everything into this LLM and tell it to write me this article. Okay. Now, obviously, the way I do content creation is not like this. My process of writing content is probably 100 times more complex than this. But needless to say, this is still an important point that I'm just going to illustrate my point. So here you can see it's got all this information that we've given it to write about, which is fine. But if we give it all of it at once, this is where we see differences. So I'm just going to jump in and show you the system prompt here. We're going to get it to give it a system prompt of what we want it to do. We're going to explain we want it to write this article, and we're going to say different techniques that we want it to do, avoid this, do that, write like this. This isn't super important because I haven't really massively overloaded it here on purpose for this test because I'm not testing this point. What I'm testing is the difference between how much input's coming in. So this is my other test down here. They've got the same system prompt, but different inputs. And this is how you do proper split testing. You don't just change too many variables at once. You just change one variable, run a test, and see what happened. So the difference here is on the down branch, which I pull, I'm going to put this into a code node here, and I'm just simply going to get it to flatten the structure out. So this code node here, all I've said to it is I want this to be restructured so that I can iterate. And iterations where it just sends one block at a time in simple language, just one block at a time that we're processing, one package of information at a time that we process, then the next, then the next. In the top branch, I didn't do that. I just gave it the whole thing. But now you can see on the right-hand side, I've got 8 items, but I can only see one of them, which is exactly what I wanted. I only want to give it this information right now on all these things here, the key points. I don't want to overload it with too much information. And why is that? Because if I do, the quality is going to slip and you're going to see why. So if we do this over here on the down branch and then do exactly the same LLM, just duplicate it, then this LLM, I'm going to map in just one item. So now you can see it's got a lot less information. It has the same first section to write about. That is in the top one. If we look at the top one, it has that information. Look at it up here. It's got it, right? But it's also got the rest of it. And that is a problem when things get more complicated. And this is where the differences come out. When I run both of those outputs here and check the difference in quality of that first item that came out, this is where I showed you at the beginning of the video where the quality really started to change. I'm going to show you that back. Let's jump back now to where we were before. So this is where I did a little experiment on those two outputs. The outputs in column 1 is when we overloaded it. The output in column 2 is when we split each section and just sent one in at a time. Everything else was kept the same. The system prompt was the same. The output structure required was the same. The same models were used. But you can notice differences in here, which I alluded to at the beginning of the video. You can see output 2 is significantly better when it talked about brown fat. It just gave more detail. It added in water temperature in the study control. In the first one, it didn't talk about that. It kind of just decided to ignore it. And down here, it had specific studies. It said it from a 2060 plus one study. Here, it didn't even talk about the study at all, where it came from. It just sort of decided to drop off that fact, which is fine in some circumstances. But if you want detail and you're losing it, you're leaking out detail, then and you don't know about it, then that's a real problem because you've overloaded the LLM and it's starting to leak quality out. Let's have a look at a couple other things that it did. Here, if we look at these two examples, you can see output 2 is superior, more detailed methodological, that's a mouthful, It says here, you can see here placebo bias is a significant methodology. I'm not even going to try and say that again. In cold water, because cold water is obviously impossible to blind in experimental settings. And here it was just quite vague. However, placebo bias was self-reporting challenges are noted. Okay, that doesn't tell me much about that. That's so vague and kind of useless if I'm writing. That's going to come through when you try and write a blog article from this. It's going to sound crap, just vague, which is the biggest problem you have when you get AI to write content. Sometimes just so vague, and it just sounds stupid. Next example, more comprehensive list of, again, there's that word, methodological issues. So you can see here it says, however, these findings often with caveats as methodological flaws are commonly noted. Just on this point, when you're writing, I wouldn't allow it to use a word like that, but in this example video, I didn't restrain it with words not to use. You would really control that. And this is where fine-tuning can come into play. When you fine-tune a model, you can tune it to not sound like this. You fine-tune it to a certain style that you want, certain grammar that you want. I didn't do it in this video, but just bear in mind, it's not going to sound like that. The point I'm trying to get across is it's got a lot more detail about facts, and it makes writing more interesting here. Okay, so if you look at this example here, it's got a comprehensive, broader range of cardiovascular risks. So here it talked about cold shots can cause significant stress for the heart or provoke arrhythmias, raise blood pressure rapidly, in rare cases even severe health episodes. Over here it was quite vague, risk-specific people with cardiovascular disorders, including possible arrhythmias. It doesn't really tell me much. Here I got more detail. The writing becomes more interesting if I've got more detail. Let's have a look at a couple of other things that it did. I think we touched on this one before. I might have duplicated this by accident. No, maybe this is another study. Let's have a look. It says specific output more precise, so specific about what's uncertain. So you can see it, and it remains unclear how significant or lasting these metabolic changes are. Here, most supporting evidence remains preliminary. Okay, it's just, again, very vague. Let's have a look at this one. Mechanism of bias. Publications bias influences the perception of cold exposure. Scientific findings showing significant or positive results or more likely to be published or promoted. Here, it's got publication bias as a concern. Okay, so you kind of get my point. I think I've got one more. Let's just have a look at this anyway while we're here, and then we can wrap this video up. Output 2 was more sophisticated in its phrasing. It talked about dopamine increases 2.5. Oh, they both had dopamine increases, sometimes 2.5. But it just looks like here it talked a little bit more detail if we read through it. Cold showers have been shown to trigger the release of endorphins and provide a uniquely sustained boost in dopamine levels. So it's not that far off. Cold showers stimulate endorphin release and significantly increase dopamine. I guess a little bit less, but it's not too obvious in this one. This one has more technical precision. This one has better transitional phrases. Okay, I'm not going to go through the rest of it now. I just wanted to grab these examples. There was a whole bunch more in the report that I created when I was doing a split testing report to see this. So this is how I can control the quality when I'm creating workflows. So let's just recap what we did in this video and the points that'll help you stand out when you're doing content automation at scale. The problem that you got to realize is when you're doing this is a simple example. If you try and get this to production level where you're doing thousands of articles, you're going to run into massive problems immediately, and it just will not work. If you bring in a lot of information into your system and you don't control and process and break it up in the right way, your quality is just going to go off a cliff. And not only that, the automation is going to be quite slow and cumbersome. And it just doesn't work. Trust me, I've done this so many times now, and I've realized that this is probably one of the most important things that people don't talk about. So let's recap what we did here by going back to the beginning and looking at my little chart that I went through at the beginning. We talked about bringing information in with ingestion, scraping, and APIs, which we did, processing data by looping, aggregating, and then iterating, which is sending packages in one at a time. We restructured data so that we could filter it. We could get it in the format using code nodes a number of times in this workflow. And then we talked about context engineering and quality control, being careful how we allow information into an LLM when we want it to do deep reasoning. And we noted that this quality drop-off, even though it had the same prompt, same model, same output requirement, the quality dropped off when we started to give it too much information at a time. Instead, when we iterated and send it one package at a time, the quality changes. So that's a really massive point when it comes to content automation. So I hope you found this video helpful on one of the biggest secrets that I've found doing this that really helps improve quality control when you're doing content automation. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for listening.